She was the kind of girl people often looked past without meaning to. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she never demanded attention. She walked with her head slightly down, not out of shame, but out of habit. Years of being unnoticed had trained her that way. In crowded places, she blended into the background like a soft shadow. If she stopped speaking, most people would not even realize she had been there. She lived in a small home, where mornings started early and nights ended late. Life had never been easy for her family. Money was always tight, and worries often sat quietly in the corners of the room. Still, there was warmth in that house, especially in the small moments shared between her and her mother. That bond was the strongest thing in her life. Her mother had worked hard all her life. Long hours, tired hands, and a smile that tried to hide the pain. Even when her body felt weak, she never complained. She believed complaining did not change anything. What mattered to her was seeing her daughter safe and hopeful. That hope was the reason she kept going. The girl had discovered music when she was very young. There was an old piano in a nearby place, where she sometimes helped clean. It was worn with a few keys that stuck, but to her, it felt like a miracle. The first time she touched it, she felt something shift inside her chest. It was as if the noise in her mind finally found a way out. She did not learn music the proper way. There were no lessons, no teachers, no fancy books. She listened, watched, and practiced when no one was around. Late at night, when the house was quiet, she imagined melodies in her head. During the day, she tapped rhythms on tables and windows, always careful not to disturb anyone. At school and in public spaces, she was rarely chosen for anything. Teachers often forgot her name. Classmates spoke over her. When group work was assigned, she was usually the last option. Some people mistook her silence for weakness. Others thought she simply had nothing to offer. She never argued with them. Inside, she felt the sting, but she had learned how to carry it quietly. Years of being ignored had taught her patience, but also doubt. Sometimes she wondered if they were right. Maybe she really was ordinary. Maybe her dreams were too big for someone like her. The only person who never doubted her was her mother, every evening. After the long day was over, her mother would sit and listen. Sometimes the girl played on a small keyboard they had borrowed. Sometimes she only hummed tunes because the keys were broken or the electricity was gone. No matter what. Her mother listened like it was the most important thing in the world. She would close her eyes and smile softly. Even when she did not fully understand music, she understood her daughter's heart. She could hear the sadness, the hope, the questions, and the love in every note. To her, it was never just sound. It was her child speaking without words. The girl noticed everything about those moments. The way her mother's shoulders relaxed, the way her breathing slowed, the way for a short while, all the pain of the day faded. Those moments became the reason she kept playing. Not for praise, not for success, but for that quiet peace she could give her mother. Outside their home, the world felt different. People rushed. They judged quickly. They did not stop to listen. In places where music was played, only confident performers were welcomed. Loud voices and bold personalities filled the room. Someone like her rarely fit in. There were times she tried to step forward. Once, she signed up for a small event. When she arrived, no one greeted her. Others laughed and talked among themselves. She waited, holding her music close, but no one called her name. In the end, she left without playing. No one noticed her leaving either. That night, she did not cry loudly. She sat next to her mother and played softly. Her fingers shook at first, but then the music steadied her. Her mother reached for her hand when she finished and told her something simple. She said that being unseen by others did not mean being unimportant. Those words stayed with her. As time passed, her mother's health began to change. The signs were small at first. Tiredness that lasted longer than usual. Pain that did not go away. The girl noticed everything, even when her mother tried to hide it. Fear slowly crept into her heart, but she never spoke of it. Instead, she played more. Music became her way of holding things together. When she felt helpless, she played. When she felt angry, she played. When she felt invisible, she played. Each note carried something she could not say out loud. People around her still did not see her. To them, she was just another quiet face in the crowd. But inside, something was growing. A quiet strength. A deep connection between her heart and her hands. One evening, after a particularly hard day, her mother asked her to play again. The girl hesitated. She felt tired and unsure, but she sat down anyway. As she played, she noticed her mother watching her closely, not just listening, but really seeing her. When the music ended, there was a long pause. Then her mother spoke gently. She told her that one day others would hear this music too, not because the girl wanted attention, but because the truth in her playing could not stay hidden forever. The girl did not answer. She was not sure she believed it. That night, as she lay awake, she thought about everything she had held back. Every time she stayed silent, every time she stepped aside, every time she chose safety over courage, she thought about how her mother listened every single time, even when the world did not. A quiet idea began to form in her mind. It was not loud or confident. It was fragile, like a small flame. But it was there. She did not know when or how. She only knew why. If she ever played in front of others again, it would not be to prove herself. It would not be to silence doubters. It would be for one person only. The person who had always listened. The person who had never ignored her, her mother. That thought stayed with her as she drifted into sleep. Unaware that this quiet decision would soon lead her into a room that would finally be forced to listen. The girl spent the next few weeks in a quiet, thoughtful mood. Every time she sat at the small piano in their living room, she played differently. Not just melodies she had known before, but music that came straight from her heart. She closed her eyes and let her feelings guide her hands. Some notes trembled, some notes soared, but each one carried a piece of her. Her mother watched her often, a gentle smile on her lips, sometimes reaching over to brush a stray hair from her daughter's face. It was a look full of quiet encouragement, a look that said, "Without words, you are seen. You are enough." The girl had never shared these thoughts with anyone else. The world outside seemed loud, busy, and uncaring. Her friends at school barely knew her. Her teachers rarely remembered her, and strangers on the street never noticed her. That was okay. She had never wanted to force anyone to understand her. Music was enough. Music was always enough. But the idea of playing in front of her mother, really playing for her, began to grow inside her. It was not about applause. It was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about keeping a promise to the person who had believed in her when no one else did. Her mother, noticing the change, started asking her about her music. "What made you play that today?" She would ask softly after a song, her voice careful not to sound like a lecture. The girl would shrug or smile, sometimes explaining how she had felt, other times simply saying it just came out. Her mother never pressured her. She just listened. That listening mattered more than any praise, more than any audience ever could. And that listening slowly gave the girl courage she had never had before. One rainy afternoon, the girl sat by the window, looking at the drops racing down the glass. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of her own breathing. Her mother had been resting after a tiring day, and the girl was alone with her thoughts. She thought about the promise she wanted to make. The promise to play, not for anyone else, but for her mother, the person who had never left her side. It felt like a strange kind of bravery, because the idea of playing in front of someone else had always scared her. But her mother had always been there. She realized that maybe courage didn't come from not feeling fear, but from deciding to move forward in spite of it. She began to prepare quietly, not with formal lessons or practice schedules, but with little rituals that felt comforting. She would warm up her fingers by tapping softly on the table, humming her favorite tunes, or closing her eyes and imagining the music as colors floating in the air. Every time she played, she imagined her mother listening, imagining her mother's soft smile and the pride that glimmered in her eyes. Those mental pictures gave her courage and made her heart steady. Even when her hands shook a little, her mother noticed these changes too. She didn't say anything directly, just gave her daughter extra attention during their small moments together. Sometimes she would gently squeeze her daughter's hand or leave a note in her room that simply said, "I am proud of you." The girl cherished these small acts. They reminded her that she was not alone, that she had someone who truly understood her. And slowly, the idea of performing for her mother transformed from a private thought into a quiet plan she could imagine. More clearly with each day, the girl also started thinking about the world outside her home. Even though people rarely noticed her, she wondered what it would feel like to step into a space where others were present. Not because she wanted their approval, but because she wanted to give something to the person she loved. She imagined a small gathering, her mother sitting quietly in a corner watching and listening. The idea of an audience was frightening, but it also felt right. It felt like a way to show love without using words. Her mother had given her so much support without ever asking for recognition. Maybe this was a way to return that love, in the only way she knew how. One evening, as she practiced a new piece she had been working on, she felt something shift inside her. The music was different that day. There was a sense of longing, of hope, of connection that she had never played with before. Her fingers moved with confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. Each note seemed to float in the air, carrying pieces of her heart and soul. Her mother sat nearby, her eyes closed, listening, and when the song ended, she didn't speak. She didn't have to. The girl could feel her mother's pride, her love, and her quiet encouragement. That was the moment the girl knew she had to keep going, to take the next step. Even if it terrified her, she decided then that she would set a day, a time, and a place. She didn't need anyone else to approve. It wasn't about fame, not about judgment, not about applause. It was about keeping a promise she had made quietly to her mother, about giving something real and heartfelt to someone who had always believed in her. She began planning in her mind, imagining the small room, the quiet attention, the soft eyes of her mother watching her every movement. It was a comforting thought, but it also brought a flutter of fear. What if she failed? What if she froze? What if the music didn't come out the way she imagined? Despite the fear, she felt ready. For the first time, she understood that fear didn't mean she shouldn't try. It just meant she cared. And this time, caring was enough to push her forward. She practiced in small sessions, refining the melodies, feeling the emotions, and learning to trust herself. Her mother continued to watch her with that quiet, unwavering support that made the world outside seem less intimidating. Sometimes they didn't even speak. They didn't need to. Music had become their language, and in that language they understood each other completely. As the days passed, the girl felt a new kind of strength growing. It wasn't loud or forceful. It wasn't something that could be seen from the outside. It was quiet, steady, and persistent. She began to carry herself differently. Even when people ignored her on the street or at school, she felt a little taller inside. She remembered that her worth wasn't tied to attention or recognition. It was tied to the love she shared and the promises she kept. Her mother's faith in her had planted a seed that grew, stronger each day. The girl also thought about the kind of music she wanted to play for her mother. It couldn't just be notes strung together. It had to carry her feelings, her gratitude, her fear, her hope, and her love. She experimented with sounds, rhythms, and pauses. She allowed herself to make mistakes and embrace them, knowing they were part of her growth. She recorded herself quietly on a small phone, listening later to understand how her emotions came through. Every practice session became a journey, not just of skill, but of heart. One rainy night, she sat down with her mother beside her, the soft sound of raindrops on the roof providing a gentle rhythm. Her mother held her hand lightly and said, "Play for me, as you feel it today." The girl nodded, taking a deep breath. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. Then she began to play. The notes were imperfect, raw and beautiful. They carried her heart in every sound. Her mother listened, eyes closed, tears silently gathering at the edges. The girl finished and looked at her mother, uncertain if she had done enough. Her mother smiled softly and whispered, "That was everything." From that moment, the girl understood something important. Playing for her mother wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty. It was about letting the music speak when words could not. It was about showing love without expecting anything in return. And that understanding gave her a quiet courage she had never known before. She knew she could step into the next part of her journey, not for anyone else, but for the person who had always believed in her. She began to imagine the day she would play in front of a room of people. But she did not imagine applause. She imagined her mother's eyes, her mother's pride, her mother's love. That was enough to fill her with determination. Every note she practiced from then on carried that promise. Every melody was a gift, every pause a silent message of love. The girl realized that the act of preparing, of practicing, and of imagining was already part of the gift itself. The music was becoming more than just sound. It was a bridge between hearts. And slowly, quietly, the girl felt herself ready, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a way that mattered most. She knew the real test wasn't in the eyes of strangers or critics. The real test was whether she could keep her promise to the one person who had never let her feel invisible. That thought gave her peace and purpose. She began to understand that sometimes the most meaningful acts of courage are the ones no one else sees. The ones done quietly for love, not recognition. Her heart felt full of anticipation. A gentle thrill that something important was about to happen. She continued practicing, feeling the music grow within her. She could almost hear the notes carrying themselves to her mother before her fingers even touched the keys. And in that quiet understanding, she discovered the power of hope, of love, and of a promise kept. The girl realized that this was just the beginning, and for the first time, she felt ready to face the world, one note at a time. For the person who had always been her home, the girl woke up that morning with a mixture of excitement and fear. Today was the day she had imagined countless times in her mind. She was going to play in front of people, but not for fame, not for applause, only for her mother. Her heart beat fast, but she told herself that fear was just a sign that she cared. She packed a small bag with her sheet music and a few personal items. And as she looked at her mother, she saw a quiet smile that gave her courage. That smile was worth more than any cheer, more than any recognition, more than anything else in the world. The room she was about to enter was small, but it felt enormous to her. People were gathered, chatting quietly, some looking at their phones, some talking to each other. It was not a hostile crowd, but it was indifferent. None of them knew her. None of them expected her to do anything remarkable. She felt a small knot of anxiety in her stomach, the same kind that had stopped her from performing before. But she reminded herself that this time it was different. This time, she was not seeking approval from them. She was giving a gift to someone she loved. That thought steadied her. She walked through the room quietly, her steps soft against the floor. Eyes glanced briefly at her, some in mild curiosity, others hardly noticing. She carried her music with care, her hands trembling slightly. Her mother followed behind her, offering a reassuring hand on her shoulder. They reached the piano at the center of the room. It was a large, polished instrument, different from the small keyboard at home, but it felt familiar enough. She opened the case and arranged the sheet music, her fingers brushing the keys gently. It was time. For a moment, she paused. The chatter of the room felt loud. The soft rustle of paper and chairs seemed amplified. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and she felt a wave of doubt. Could she really do this? Could she play in front of people who did not know her, who might not care? She took a deep breath, thinking of her mother's eyes, her mother's quiet encouragement, and she began. The first notes were careful, deliberate, as if she was testing the waters. The sound filled the room softly, almost like a whisper. People began to notice. Some turned their heads. Some stopped talking. But there was no instant recognition, no sudden awe. That was fine. She did not need it. She closed her eyes, letting her fingers move naturally, letting the music guide her. Each note carried her thoughts, her feelings, and her promise. Her heart poured into every sound. As she played, she remembered every quiet moment at home. She remembered the nights spent practicing alone, the soft hum of melodies while her mother listened, the tears she had hidden from the world, the tiny smiles of encouragement. All of those memories were woven into the music. Each key she pressed was a conversation with her mother, a way to say, "I love you. I am here. I have tried." Slowly, the room began to change. The chatter that had filled the air grew quieter. People paused mid-conversation, sensing something different. The music was not loud or showy, but it was sincere, and sincerity has a way of catching attention. Eyes turned toward the piano, not in judgment, but in curiosity. There was something in the way she played, a depth that spoke to emotions they could not name. Some held their breath, realizing that this was not a performance seeking praise, but a message from one heart to another. Her mother watched quietly, sitting in the corner, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were glistening with unshed tears. She did not speak, did not clap prematurely, but she was present in every note. The girl felt the reassurance, the connection, and it strengthened her. She felt the courage grow inside her like a small flame turning into a steady light. She played as if the world outside no longer existed. There were no strangers here, no indifferent faces, only the music and her mother's gaze. As the piece continued, she allowed herself to become vulnerable. She played the quiet parts softly, the notes trembling with emotion, and the louder parts with confidence and clarity. Every mistake, every hesitation was part of the story. She did not need to hide it. Imperfection was honesty, and honesty was what mattered most. She remembered the nights when she had been unsure, practicing alone, doubting herself. Now those doubts were transformed into music that carried her heart for everyone to hear. By the middle of the piece, the room had fallen completely silent. Chairs creaked as people shifted, drawn to the unexpected beauty of what they were witnessing. The girl had no idea how many people were watching. She didn't need to. Her focus was her mother. Each phrase she played was a message of gratitude, of love, of courage. She felt tears threaten to spill, but she let them mingle with the music, not interrupt it. Her fingers danced across the keys, sometimes strong, sometimes soft, always truthful. She noticed a few people visibly moved. One person's hand covered their mouth, another leaned forward as if trying to catch every note. But she did not look at them. She did not play for them. She played because she had promised herself and her mother that she would. That promise gave her strength. That promise carried her through moments when she almost faltered, when her hands trembled, or when a note lingered longer than expected. Every sound, every pause, every breath was deliberate. Because every sound was a conversation with the person who mattered most. As she approached the final section of the piece, the music grew fuller, richer, more expressive. She allowed herself to release the tension she had held for weeks, months, years. The emotions that had been buried deep came to the surface. There was fear, there was love, there was hope, and there was gratitude. The room seemed to vibrate with the honesty of her music. Some faces softened, some eyes widened, some hearts quieted. Everyone could sense that this was not a performance meant for entertainment, it was a story. A life lived quietly and deeply, shared through sound. When she struck the final chord, it lingered in the air longer than expected. Silence followed. No one clapped immediately. No one spoke. But it was a silence filled with recognition, a recognition of effort, of truth, of courage. The girl opened her eyes slowly, her chest heaving slightly, and looked toward her mother. Her mother's hands were pressed lightly to her mouth, her eyes shining with pride. That was all the response she needed. The applause that came a few moments later was not important. The connection she had forged, the promise she had fulfilled, that was everything. People in the room began to speak quietly among themselves, sharing astonishment at the raw emotion and talent they had just witnessed. Some approached her to compliment her, but the girl did not linger on their words. She simply nodded politely, feeling a warmth that was not dependent on their approval. She had given the gift she wanted to give, and it was enough. Her mother came to her, took her hands in hers, and whispered words of love and pride that made the girl's heart swell. She had done it. She had faced her fear, and in doing so, she had shared the most important part of herself with the person who mattered most. As they left the room together, the girl felt a quiet sense of triumph. Not the kind that comes from being noticed or praised, but the kind that comes from fulfilling a promise. From being true to herself, from giving someone else a piece of your heart. The experience had changed her. She realized that she could face the world not for attention or fame, but with honesty and courage. And more importantly, she had learned that music, and played from the heart, has the power to move even the most indifferent souls. Walking home with her mother, the girl's mind was full of reflection. She thought about how people had ignored her for so long, how she had learned to be invisible, and how fear had often held her back. But now she understood that being overlooked by the world had not diminished her value. It had prepared her to understand the importance of love, connection, and courage. And most of all, it had allowed her to share something real with the person who had never left her side. That night, as they sat quietly at home, the girl placed her hands on the small keyboard once more, playing softly for herself and her mother. The room was filled with warmth, not from applause or attention, but from understanding, love, and the quiet power of a promise kept. She realized that this was only the beginning of her journey, and that courage and honesty would guide her through every challenge ahead. Music had become more than just sound. It was a bridge, a language, and a gift that could never be ignored by those who truly mattered. And in that quiet moment, the girl knew that no matter what the world thought of her, she had discovered something far greater than recognition. She had discovered the strength to be herself, the courage to face fear, and the power to touch a heart with nothing more than sincerity and love. It was a lesson she would carry forever, in every note she played, in every melody she shared, and in every promise she honored. The girl had never experienced anything like that day before. The way the room had grown quiet, the way people had stopped and listened, it had been a revelation. Even though she had played for her mother, even though she had never sought attention from the strangers in the room, their reaction had been undeniable. The experience gave her a strange mixture of relief and amazement. She realized that music, when it comes from the heart, has the power to affect people even when it is not intended for them. It had surprised her, but it also strengthened her resolve. After the performance, she spent the next few days in a quiet, reflective mood. The applause and comments from strangers had been polite, some even enthusiastic, but she did not focus on them. What mattered most to her was her mother's quiet pride, the tears in her eyes, and the gentle words whispered at the end. That was beautiful. You have given me everything. That was the truth she held on to. She realized that all the fear, all the preparation, and all the doubt had led to this moment. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means moving forward despite it. Music became her sanctuary in a way it never had before. Every evening, she would sit at the small piano in their living room, letting her hands move freely across the keys. She experimented with new melodies, allowing the emotions she had felt during her performance to flow into her music. Joy, fear, love, longing, everything she had experienced found a place in her melodies. Her mother listened as always, sometimes smiling softly, sometimes closing her eyes, letting the music speak in place of words. It was during these evenings that the girl began to truly understand the power of expression. Word of her performance spread slowly. People who had attended the gathering spoke of the quiet girl who had captivated them without trying, who had shared something so genuine that it could not be ignored. Some offered kind words when they saw her in the street or at school. Others simply nodded in recognition, as if acknowledging her existence for the first time. She did not seek these responses, but they were a quiet confirmation of something she had always known. Her music was powerful because it was real, because it was her. Despite the growing attention, she remained grounded. She never allowed herself to be carried away by praise. Instead, she focused on what had driven her from the beginning, the promise to her mother. The quiet moments of connection and the desire to express what could not be said in words. Each day, she practiced, refining her skills, exploring new techniques, and discovering new ways to make the music her own. She learned that talent alone was not enough. It needed patience, dedication, and most importantly, honesty. The girl also began to notice changes in herself. She carried herself differently, with a quiet confidence that had been absent before. She no longer felt invisible. People might still overlook her in a crowd, but she had discovered an inner strength that made their indifference irrelevant. She realized that being seen was not the same as being recognized. Recognition could be fleeting, but the knowledge of her own worth and the fulfillment of her promise to her mother was permanent. It was something no one could take away. Her mother continued to be her anchor. Even as people began to compliment her, the girl never forgot that the most important audience was the one who had always believed in her. Each evening, when she played, her mother's presence reminded her of why she had started this journey. It was not for applause or approval. It was for love, for connection, and for the joy of sharing a piece of herself. That realization gave her music depth and meaning that could not be taught or learned from books. It came from the heart. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a small local event. The idea of playing in front of a larger group was terrifying. Memories of past failures, moments of being overlooked, and the anxiety of public attention all returned. She felt the old knot of fear in her stomach, but she also remembered the quiet strength she had discovered. She remembered how she had played for her mother, how the music had flowed naturally, and how the honesty of her performance had spoken louder than words ever could. That memory gave her courage. She began preparing for the event in her own way. She did not practice for the audience, but for herself and for the promise she had made long ago. Each note, each phrase, each pause was a reflection of her journey, her growth, and her love. She experimented with variations in tempo, dynamics, and expression. Sometimes she would stumble, but she learned to embrace the imperfections as part of the music. They were part of her story just as much as the flawless notes. The day of the event arrived. She felt a familiar flutter of anxiety as she approached the venue. People were already gathering, chatting, and moving about. She could feel the same sense of indifference in the room that had greeted her the first time she played for an audience. But this time, she did not let it shake her. She reminded herself why she was there. She reminded herself of the promise to her mother and the power of honesty in music. That thought steadied her. She stepped forward with quiet determination. Her mother followed closely, her presence a steady reassurance. The girl approached the piano, feeling the smooth surface of the keys beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the music to flow naturally. The first notes were tentative, but then her confidence grew. She played with expression, letting the emotions of the past weeks pour into the melody. The room began to quiet as people turned their attention toward her, drawn by the sincerity of her performance. As she played, she allowed herself to be fully present. She was not performing for approval, not playing to impress anyone. She was sharing a piece of herself, her emotions, her journey, and her love. The music carried her story, the struggles of being ignored, the moments of doubt, the quiet victories, and the unwavering support of her mother. Every note, every pause, every phrase was infused with meaning. It was a performance that could not be replicated or rehearsed, because it came from a place of truth. People in the room began to react. Some leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected depth of emotion. Others closed their eyes, letting the music speak to feelings they could not articulate. A few whispered to each other, amazed that someone so quiet and unassuming could create something so powerful. But the girl did not focus on them. She focused on her mother, who sat quietly in the corner, her eyes shining with pride and love. That was her anchor, her reason, her purpose. As the piece progressed, she felt herself becoming more expressive. She allowed the music to rise and fall naturally, following the emotions within her. She embraced the imperfections, letting them add character and honesty to the performance. The room seemed to transform around her, filled with a sense of awe and reverence. The music had a life of its own, carrying the hearts of both the performer and the listeners. The girl realized that this was the true power of music. It connects, it moves, and communicates in ways words never can. When the final note lingered in the air, there was a long silence. No one moved immediately. No one spoke. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, absorbing the weight of what had just been shared. Then, slowly, applause began to build. People clapped, some softly at first, then louder, more enthusiastically. But the girl did not focus on the applause. She looked at her mother, who was smiling through tears, her hands pressed lightly to her lips. That smile, that quiet expression of love and pride, was more important than any recognition from strangers after the performance. People approached her to compliment her, some asking how she had learned to play with such emotion. She listened politely, thanked them, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She thought of the evenings spent at home, the quiet moments with her mother, the promise she had made, and the courage she had found within herself. Those were the things that truly mattered. The audience could see her music, but her mother had hurt her heart. That connection was irreplaceable. The experience changed her in ways she could not fully articulate. She realized that sharing her music, even with strangers, did not diminish the intimacy of her bond with her mother. If anything, it strengthened it. She understood that the power of music lies not in recognition or applause, but in honesty, vulnerability, and love. She had taken the risk to share her heart, and in doing so, she had discovered a strength she had never known existed. In the days that followed, she continued to play, exploring new melodies, refining her skills, and deepening her understanding of music. She experimented with emotions, rhythms, and dynamics, always mindful that every note was an expression of her heart. Her mother remained by her side, listening, supporting, and encouraging. The bond between them grew stronger with every evening spent at the piano, every shared silence, every gentle word of affirmation. The girl also began to notice subtle changes in the people around her. Those who had once overlooked her now treated her with a quiet respect. They recognized the depth and sincerity in her, even if they did not fully understand it. But she did not rely on their recognition. She had discovered a truth far more valuable, that her worth was not determined by others, but by the love she shared and the promises she kept. That understanding gave her a quiet confidence that radiated in every aspect of her life. Through this journey, the girl learned something profound, that the courage to be vulnerable, to share one's heart honestly, is one of the most powerful acts a person can take. She learned that music, when played with sincerity, has the ability to touch lives in ways that words cannot. She learned that being ignored by the world does not diminish one's value, and that the love of a single person, someone who truly sees and understands you, can be enough to give strength for a lifetime. As she sat at the piano each evening, the girl felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She no longer feared being overlooked or undervalued. She no longer doubted the power of her own voice. She understood that every note she played was a message of truth, every pause a moment of reflection, and every melody a bridge between hearts. And in that quiet, transformative understanding, she realized that she had discovered something far greater than talent or recognition. She had discovered the courage to be herself, the power of love, and the beauty of honesty expressed through music. That night, as she played softly with her mother beside her, the girl felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The music flowed naturally, carrying with it the experiences, emotions, and promises of the past weeks. She knew that this journey was only beginning, and that each performance, each note, each melody would continue to teach her about courage, love, and the power of connection. She had faced her fear, shared her heart, and discovered that the true impact of music lies not in applause, but in honesty, emotion, and the bonds it creates. And in that quiet room, illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp, the girl realized that she had found her place not in the recognition of strangers, but in the love of someone who had always believed in her, in the courage to be vulnerable, and in the knowledge that her music could speak when words were not enough. It was a moment she would carry with her forever, a lesson in love, resilience, and the transformative power of sharing one's heart through the language of music. The girl had come a long way from the quiet, overlooked presence she once was. That day she had played for her mother in front of the strangers. She had discovered something she'd never expected, the power of truth, courage, and love expressed through music. That moment had shifted something deep inside her. It was no longer about fear or doubt or even about being noticed by the world. It was about honesty, connection, and the fulfillment of a promise she had made long ago. But she also realized that this was only the beginning. The journey she had started with a single promise had opened doors she had never imagined. Doors to confidence, courage, and the ability to touch hearts with her music. In the weeks after her performance, she continued to play with her mother beside her. Those evenings had become sacred, filled with shared glances, soft smiles, and silent understanding. Each note she played was infused with the lesson she had learned that fear could be faced, that courage was possible even when trembling, and that love could give strength beyond imagination. She began experimenting with new melodies, creating pieces that were complex, emotional, and deeply personal. She was no longer playing for practice alone. She was exploring the world of music through the lens of her own life, her emotions, and her experiences. People around her began to notice the changes too. Those who had once ignored her now approached her with curiosity and respect. Some asked to hear her play, others simply watched from a distance, unsure of how to express the awe they felt. The girl did not seek their approval, but she noticed the subtle shift. She realized that her courage and sincerity had a quiet ripple effect. Her music, born from love and honesty, had the power to move people, even those who had never paid attention to her before. And yet she never let these reactions change the way she approached her craft. She played not for recognition, but because the music was a reflection of her heart. Her mother, of course, remained the center of her journey. Every evening when she played at home, her mother listened with the same quiet, unwavering attention she always had. There was no judgment, no expectation, just love and understanding. Her mother's presence reminded her that the deepest connection she could ever have through music was with the one person who had always believed in her. The girl understood that talent alone was not enough. It was the honesty of the heart, the courage to be vulnerable, and the willingness to share love that made music truly powerful. One day, the girl was invited to perform at a slightly larger venue, a place where more people could listen. The thought of playing in front of an even bigger audience was intimidating. She felt the familiar stirrings of fear, the doubts creeping back into her mind. What if she failed? What if the music did not come out the way she wanted? What if people judged her harshly? But then she remembered her mother's words from the first performance. Play from your heart. That is all that matters. She realized that the fear was natural, but it did not have to control her. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was taking action despite it. And she had already done that before. She could do it again. She spent the following days preparing, not just practicing the music, but preparing her heart. She imagined the room filled with people, their faces uncertain at first, then attentive, and finally moved. She envisioned her mother sitting quietly in the front row, smiling, proud, and calm. That image gave her strength. She reminded herself that this performance, like the last, was a gift, not a test. It was not about judgment or applause. It was about sharing something real, something true, something born from her heart. And with that thought, the knot of fear in her stomach began to ease.